us from early stage investing. We have Dhruv, we have Sushanto, and the Bhishma Pitama of the startup ecosystem, K. Ganesh himself. So let me not take any more time. I'm going to hand it over to Dhruv and Sushanto. They will set the context. There is going to be a long chat with Ganesh. They're going to grill him for about 45 minutes. And then in the meantime, you all can send your questions to us, and post 45 minutes, whenever they are ready to answer your questions, we will start sending it to them. So Dhruv and Sushanto, over to you folks.
Thanks, Naveen. Thanks, Dhruv and Ganesh. And thanks, TiE Mumbai, for hosting this. And looking forward to a wonderful conversation with Dhruv and Ganesh. So again, not losing any time, because getting a few minutes of Ganesh's time is very valuable. So we try to maximize his views and his thoughts on this. So before we get on to grilling him with questions, Dhruv, you want to go and quickly give a little background of the book so that people know the context that we're talking about?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just do that. And just hold on. Yeah, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Dhruv.
Yeah. So till about 8 days back, I used to be a professor. I've now retired, but professors, as you know, like to make PPT. So I made a PPT. Okay. So basically, we've written a book between Sushanto and me, and this is the book. It's called Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. And what I will just do is I will take you through something which is very basic to the book and something which is a common thread right through the book. See, the book has lots and lots of stories about successful startups as well as failed startups. But the one common thing which we have is what we call a framework for trying to improve the likelihood of success of a startup, right? And that framework is what we call persistent. And I'll just take you through that in about 7-8 minutes, after which, obviously, we'll be talking to Ganesh, right? So the framework is called persistent. And what that basically means is that each of these letters in the word persistent stands for something that you need to take care of in case you're creating a startup. And by the way, exactly the same thing is looked for by a person who wants to fund a startup, right? So the investor. So first step obviously is a problem. You have to be solving a problem for somebody, otherwise, nobody is going to come to you. Secondly, even if you're solving a problem for the potential customer, you have to have an earnings model. You've got to have revenue, and ultimately you have to have costs where the unit economics should be positive. Ultimately, may not be today, but ultimately, right? So you have to have a solid earnings model. Third, the size of the market has to be large enough, because, if it's not large, then at some stage your startup is going to stagnate. And the whole purpose of creating a startup is to really disrupt the environment, right? Why would you create a startup where, the revenue stops at, let's say, 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs, okay? So the size of the market has to be large. However, you will have some situations where you have a very crowded market, right? Where, for example, there are lots and lots of players in the market. For instance, in the travel space today, there's a huge number of people. You've got Ebix, you've got Make My Trip, you've got Yatra, you've got lots of other guys. So if you have a crowded market and you're trying to create a startup within that, it's going to be very tough to compete with these big guys. So ideally, you should identify a non-crowded subset or niche of that market, but that niche also should be large enough. All right. So I have picked up 4 letters from the word persistent. Obviously, scalability is important. You may have a huge market size that you're working within. However, if you don't scale up rapidly within that, you'll have enough other guys with the same idea, and they'll, typically eat into your market share. They'll scale up faster than you, and ultimately they might kill you. So scalability becomes extremely important. And, typically if you have a pure digital business, that's much more scalable. If you have something which is very heavily dependent on manpower, where you want to add 20% revenue, you have to add 20% manpower. That is tough to scale, because you'll keep recruiting people will keep leaving, you'll have to get more and more infrastructure, more buildings, and so on. So that's less scalable. Okay, so scalability becomes an extremely important issue. Obviously, any business that you have, risks are extremely important. And one of the most important risks is the risk of competition getting in. And, to overcome this risk, what you need is what we call a moat, or I would also call it an entry barrier, right? So this is your business. Can you create something within this business so that it is a barrier to your competitor who wants to enter the same business, right? Which is why we'll call it an entry barrier. And as you can see, each of these letters is forming the word persistent. Obviously, one way to create an entry barrier is if you have an innovative solution. For example, if you have an IP, some kind of IP, ideally, if you have a patent or two, even an international patent, that's great, because that's an entry barrier, because legally the other guy is not permitted to copy you. Very, very important, the team, and the team always starts with the founder, right? We believe in the investment world. Both Sushanto and I have been in the investment world in startups for many, many years now. And I think, one of the things we strongly believe in is, if you have a business model which is average, but you have a great founder, he will probably figure out a way to convert that business model to great, and he'll make it work. But if you have a great business model, but an average founder, chances are it will not work, right? So team starting with the founder becomes extremely important. And of course, the last thing, you may have the best of everything, great innovation, terrific entry barrier, wonderful earnings model, but ultimately, are you getting money out of it? Are you getting customers? Are these customers growing month on month, quarter on quarter? Are they paying you? Are the revenues growing quarter on quarter, year on year? So traction is the ultimate proof of this business working, right? So if you look at the first letter of each of these, that's the word persistent, which is our framework. I just want to add one thing, and then I'll conclude. Persistent is also an English word, right? And persistent means what? Keep on and on and on and on at it. And I don't think anybody knows this better than Ganesh. Ganesh has created lots and lots of very highly successful startups. And the current one, which of course he and his wife are running, is called Portia Medical, which is the market leader in the healthcare space. So I'm sure if you ask him, he would also tell you any startup will have ups, it will have downs, probably more downs than ups. You'll have competition coming in, suddenly you'll have the government regulations changing, RBI will chip in with some new regulation, all kinds of issues you'll have. 2-3 years ago, we had the angel tax. Suddenly everything went haywire. You got to keep on and on at it. You can't give up, right? So just to conclude the framework persistent, as equally important is the English word persistent. You as a founder have to be persistent. That's the only way to be. All right. So I think with that, I will just stop and hand it back to Sushanto. And I'll just stop sharing my screen 1 minute.
So yeah, Ganesh, question is of course to you. You have been prolific and persistent. So that's you're like a dream of entrepreneurs who wants to do multiple things, and through Growth Story you've been able to do that. But and you continuously meet entrepreneurs. So do you think that is persistence really that important, or you want to be like you are also looking for the meteors who suddenly rise? And the other is that, do you see a gradual sort of especially amongst the new generation entrepreneurs, a lack of persistence?
Okay, thanks. Firstly, Dhruv and Sushanto and Time Mumbai, thanks for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to speak with young entrepreneurs, want-to-be entrepreneurs, people who are in the startup ecosystem. And even though that is not the intent of pandemic, the pandemic has ensured that without taking the trouble to travel, the same thing I'm sure I would have been forced to travel, because I can't refuse Sushanto to Mumbai or Delhi to do this. Okay, right? This is so it's for people like me. It's all about better lazy people like me that we are able to sit in our homes and still give gyan. Okay, right? If I may use that word. No, so clearly, I mean, as you would have observed and seen, persistence is a prerequisite. I would love to be a meteor. I would love to have stellar success, one big Facebook, Snapchat, Google, and all that stuff. Then I don't have to be persistent. I can do one thing and do that stuff. And there are people who have done it, whether it is Microsoft or Dell, or in India, even people like Sanjeev Bikhchandani who have done that. So there are good examples, but those. I mean, there also it's persistence. It's not that they were not persistent, okay, right? So they were persistent. So I think the startup journey, startup risk, the unknown variables are so high that you have to be out there. I'm a tennis fan. I play tennis every day, so I can tell you. So you have to be standing in the court, standing at the net, waiting for the ball to come so that you can dunk it. Okay, right? If you're not going to be in the court, then you cannot win. If you're not standing at the net and be ready with your racket, you're not going to win. So the only way to win is be out there, be persistent, as the English word says. The good part is that opportunities do come, despite the fact that there are so many unknowns, so many variables, so many curveballs that hit you, googlies that you get. The fact is opportunities do come and you are able to cash in on opportunities. But the prerequisite, with your racket, be at the net and be standing there and be alert, so you will win. That also makes it very important what you have covered in the book. Okay, right? To be able to be there persistently requires funding. Okay, people underestimate the difficulty in raising funding, or they don't understand the nature of angel funds or startup funds. So they are aghast, even though they have a great idea, they have a good business model as per them and profitable, it doesn't get funded, while some other loss-making unit metric negative models get funded and they get frustrated and all that. I can tell you, after being in this space for the last 31 years, my first business was 1990. Even now, I don't understand why certain models get funded, why certain companies, most of the times, the valuations aghast me. If you ask me, 9 out of 10 funding rounds that get done, I don't agree with the valuation. I'm stunned by it after 31 years and multiple rounds of funding and being on both sides. But it's very important that you have the funding so that you have the luxury to be persistent and keep playing out, keep playing the game. Okay.
Right.
So
I'll just ask one question, Dhruv, if you don't mind, then I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah.
So do you think, Ganesh, persistent and luck are somewhat interrelated? Because let's say somebody was lucky and he got this, but do you see somewhere that persistent and luck are related? That means you stand enough long enough on the tennis court, the ball will come to you.
Correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think unless you are extremely lucky, okay, providentially lucky, that you stand there the first 2 times, the ball comes to you directly and hit that. The only solution is to be out there for a long enough time and you will win. See, also people follow they go after the wrong metric. The metric is not what percentage of shots you have won. Okay, the metric is whether you have won or not. What is the final score line? Just like in football, if you were to go away from tennis, you have one team that has taken 25 shots at the goal, have converted only 20%. There is another team which has taken 5 shots at the goal and converted 90%. Okay. Now you may say the second team is very effective because they have converted 90%. But who won the game? It's the first team that won the game. 20% of 25 is 5. Okay, 5 goals they got. Ultimately, what matters in a game is the score line, is not the percentage. So same is true with startup entrepreneurs in their entire startup journey. It doesn't matter how many times you have failed. It doesn't matter how many ideas of yours have failed, how many companies you have had to shut down. It doesn't matter. It is that one particular win that makes the difference. That's where you make money. That's where you make value. That's where you solve problems. So I'm very happy to say 9 out of 10 things that I do fail. But if I do many things continuously, that 1 out of 10 is actually I do 100 things, I have won 10 times. That's better than somebody who says I have tried twice and I have won 50% of the time. Okay, right? So I think persistence, luck is very, very highly overrated. Luck will come to you. Okay, right? When I was small, my teacher used to tell me that if hopes are dupes, fears can be liars, right? So, which basically means that whatever you're hoping for does not happen because you get duped. Similarly, what you fear also will not pass through. So don't worry about it. So that I think is the golden mantra. I mean, I lost all my hair in being persistent and this 31-year journey. Okay, right?
I'm waiting to do that. Over to you, Dhruv. Yeah.
Okay. So, Ganesh, one of the issues which a lot of founders keep asking us, and in these times we've been conducting a huge number of webinars, and this question comes up again and again. You have these huge unicorns, right, which are constantly loss making, but they keep growing, they keep getting funding, and ultimately they remain loss making. Ultimately there is no profit anywhere, right? Now, question which young founders have, and I suspect a lot of founders on this webinar will also have, is that the right way to go? So should we just look at growth at any cost? Keep growing, don't worry, keep burning up cash, you will get funds from somewhere, keep growing at any cost. Is that the right way? Or should it be a more stable business model where you have to make money and not depend on funding?
Okay, this is a great question. It will take hours and hours to answer, and there is no one right answer. And even to me, I also answer this question both ways, depending upon what is my mood and which of my startup is doing well and which of my startup is struggling. So
Okay.
I'm very ambivalent based on the same question can be answered by me completely differently in some other context. Okay, right? So therefore, pardon me. Those are all the caveats and disclosures. Okay, right? Firstly, I think nobody has been able to convincingly answer this question of unicorn valuation, why they get valued at so much, should they be valued at so much. But to be fair, it is not surprising. For every, and Shushanto and for every one investor who values it at unicorn valuation, $1 billion valuation, and puts in, say, $100 million check, for every one investor, at the same round, same time, there are at least 10 other institutional investors who balk at that valuation, who give it a pass, who don't write the check, who say it's extremely expensive, okay, right? And walk away from it, okay, right? And so if this happens to institutional seasoned investors who are their job of evaluating unicorn, and 1 out of 10 signs up and 9 out of 10 snigger at the valuation, it's quite obvious that you and me and the people on this call also find it very difficult to explain, okay, right? So that is point number one. Point number two, there are clearly certain business models where trying to be the de facto standard for an industry or sector in a particular geography like India has got huge disproportionate valuation. Since we are talking about unicorn, we are talking about valuation. Valuation is different than the intrinsic value of the company. Valuation is also based on perception, based on future, and based on demand supply for that share or stock. Is HDFC or ICICI valued at X or Y today? I don't know. Tomorrow it falls 4%. Overnight, the bank does not change by 4%. The value of the company doesn't change by 4%. What has changed is the demand and supply for the stock has changed so that it sees a 4% drop in value or a 5% increase, because there is only limited asset available and demand supply changes. So that is the differentiation. So therefore, for all of us as entrepreneurs, we should not get too much concerned, worried, surprised, or distraught by these valuation numbers. And we have seen enough examples of valuations going down completely also, okay, right? So therefore, that's not value of the company, it's valuation of the company. Now, there are some models which are de facto standards for a large sector in a large country like India, which if you own, then you can command a disproportionate valuation, whether it is Flipkart or Amazon or Big Basket in the grocery space, Ola, Uber, in that space, or Oyo. I mean, these are Paytm. These are all examples of a large country, large enough population, potentially high growth rate, consistent future growth rate, and market leader in that particular space. Whether it is right or wrong, nobody can say, only future will tell you. Flipkart, when it was valued at 1 billion, people sniggered at it. 2 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion. Eventually, it actually got sold for cash for 18 billion. So it was not paper valuation. All those were paper. So billions of dollars came into Flipkart. Billions, multiple of that, people made money. People put in money, deployed money in Indian market, took out money from Indian market, and returned to the investors. So enough has been shown to say that future might prove it right. But last comment on this, in general, all startup valuation, I'm sure you guys agree in angel and early stage funding, all valuations in the near term look to be very highly priced. Over longer term look to be very reasonably priced. Just like Flipkart valuation at 1 and 5 billion would look very, very low priced.
So, so Sushanto, I'll just add to this question. Okay. So agreed, absolutely agreed with what you're saying, Ganesh. The one comment which we normally give, one piece of advice we normally give to founders is, when they say, do we grow at any cost and keep burning cash and hope that funding will come in? The message we try and give is, look, you should be able to, see, initially you will need funds, there's no choice, right? But ultimately, you have to be able to survive on your own. But if you want to grow, depend on funds. Taking funds for growth, as long as you can survive on your own, is fine. The investor is unlikely to fund you if you need funding for survival, but he'll give you funding for growth. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think there are, I mean, this was an earlier question also, which I didn't answer fully. So clearly, the venture capital ecosystem, to that extent, even the angel investor ecosystem, is looking for high risk, high return play. Okay, yeah. Right? Therefore, let's be clear. We are not talking about a bank funding or a financial institution funding. We are talking about venture capital, which presumes the fact that you need to take high risk, you need to return big if you are able to win. So this is a very specific type of capital which is focused on high growth, high return. If you take money from a venture capital fund, takes money from an investor and gives 12%, 15% return, he's not going to be happy, because he's going to come back and say, listen, this is coming from my pocket or my allocation, which is meant for high risk. You don't return the money, I can stand. But you will return the money in 7 years at 15% average IRR is not acceptable. That's not why I put money here. If that I were to do, I would put it in debt funds, or I would put it in some other project finance. So be very, very clear. So this is meant for high growth. Now then the question comes is, how much growth is high growth? Now there are business models, there are sectors where you will continue to burn. You have to go for market share. You will need to continuously raise money. And for you to raise next round of funding, you are dependent on showing growth, which means you need to burn the money. There is no glory in your saving the money, trying to reach cash break even with the money that you have raised, not growing, because that does not suit the venture capital investor ecosystem and mindset. Then you should, if you are in that business, you should go to a bank or a friend or family and raise money. You can even mortgage your house, because it's a safe investment. Yeah. Okay, right? Because it's not going to go. So I think that's where. Now, if you take e-commerce, if you take Big Basket, if you take e-grocery, okay, right? These are high burn, high growth, market share, leadership, dependent upon subsequent rounds of fundraise, where growth is almost required. It will not break even in till Series D, Series E, Series F. So you have no choice but to do it. But if you take some other business model which may have got B2B funding, Series A, Series B, B2B business models and all that stuff, there you cannot afford to take this strategy, because you will not be able to raise subsequent money. You cannot afford to burn. So to answer your question, whether it's the right strategy or not depends on what business model you are following. Are you optimizing for next level of fundraise, which is what is required in case of e-commerce or in case of hardware businesses and all of those? Okay, right? B2C businesses with very high CAC, require that kind of funding to be able to do that. Otherwise, you'll be such a small company that you will not get funding, nor will you be able to create a valuable company. So a lot depends on that. Few business model is high burn, high growth.
Correct.
Balance have to be more. So what is key question? The reason you are asking that people concern is, it's fine to burn money, but what about burning money on a per unit order basis? If every order you are going to lose money, then you double the number of orders, double the money you lose. Now that is a very highly questionable model. Losing money overall as a company is fine because you're not breaking even, including corporate overheads. Unit metric negative, that is a matter of debate. I leave it to you.
Valid. Sushanto?
Right. So, Ganesh, this is slightly away from the topic, but do you see that the entrepreneurs today are increasingly focusing on those? Because see, these are the poster boys, Ola, the Flipkarts of the world are the poster boys of the startup world. Zoho, yes, is exciting, but it got sort of into flavor much later. So do you see this trend amongst entrepreneurs all going for those poster boy type of business models and then having such a large failure rate vis-a-vis people who are saying, okay, I want to first build a business and then build valuation? Do you see that trend?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is because of the social media, because of general digital media and the glamour that media attaches to valuations, we have almost seen valuation as a surrogate measure or metric of success. Okay, right? So that is what get focused upon. Obviously, all of us know entrepreneurship is not that. Those are a handful of few things that get glamorized and talked about, whether it's unicorn valuation or fastest to unicorn valuation and all of those. Otherwise, we do have hundreds and thousands and millions of lifestyle businesses, which are not traditional venture capital fundable businesses, right? Which will never get the attention of media. So to answer your question, in the college, in the networking events, in all of that stuff, because all of us, including you and me, glamorize the valuation and make them the poster boys, obviously the youngsters get attracted automatically to that. This was not the case when you and I graduated out of college, because this did not exist. Okay, right? But today that's what exists. You see somebody in 20-year-old, 25-year-old, 2 years becomes a unicorn. He creates YouTube videos, he creates traffic and becomes that. Obviously, it becomes that. I don't think there is anything wrong in that, because the digital world, the new world, the millennials or the young ones hooked on to TikTok, Snap, video games, online gaming, all of that is possible to scale and create that. Only word of caution is that is only one way to build a business, not the only way. There are huge number of opportunities outside it. So my advice to a youngster, if you can hit upon a Snap equivalent or an Unacademy equivalent, please go ahead and do it. Okay, right? All power to you, you must do it. Follow the glamour, follow the path, follow the limelight, and just go for it. Doesn't matter even if you fail. Even if the failure rate is high, it's fine. But if you are not in that camp, if you don't have that particular idea, I want to tell you there are 99% other business opportunities which are available today. Leveraging internet, leveraging technology, solving basic problems, where you can still make a lot of money. May not get you a ET Entrepreneur of the Year award on the front page, but enough to keep you satisfied, happy, and all of that stuff. And actually, that's what people are doing. For every 1-2 names that you mentioned, there are hundreds other very successful names. I'm sure if you had the time, you yourself will mention it.
Sure. Yeah, India Mart, I think, is a good example.
Great example. India Mart is a great example, which has been built over a period of time. Even multiple of those. Right?
What do you, Dhruv?
Okay, so Ganesh, one of the issues which came up during this year, obviously, is the hot topic of the day, which is COVID. Right now, that obviously is a once in a century kind of event. Nobody anticipated it, but if you look at the 21st century, there have actually been two more such major events, although they are not once in a century. So you had the dot-com crash in the early 2000s, and you had the global financial crisis in the year 2007, 2008. Now, suddenly the issue of risk has come up front. COVID, obviously, nobody could have anticipated. Even the others, actually, nobody really anticipated. So, I mean, these issues just came out of nowhere, and they could happen again. It could be something completely different, right? So, how does a young founder tackle the issue of risk, because these are all completely unknown unknowns?
Yeah. So I think, see, there are two answers here. One is, in the short term, obviously risk, things like COVID is extremely disruptive and distressing for all of us, right? Emotionally, physically, even for employees, even for companies, for founders, for startup, and all of that is there. Unless you're working for a multinational where the salaries are assured and they are protecting and all that stuff, most of the people, whether they are self-employed or entrepreneurs or in startup or even in private companies, have challenge because people are cutting costs, laying off people, furloughing people, reducing salaries and all that. So in the short term, it is obviously distressing, painful, unwanted, and nobody wishes it. Okay, right? That's the short answer. But actually, this is where the opportunity is, because any crisis changes the status quo. When the status quo gets changed is when startups, people who are nimble, people who are more footloose and fancy free, people who have the agility, not the dinosaur, can actually change, capitalize and do it. If you have a large factory that was making luxury goods, okay, what can you do? Your investment is gone into that 200 crore you invested in that luxury goods strip. Your supply chain, your suppliers, your vendors, your DNA, everything is there. And imagine instead of that, you're a 2 crore startup.
Yeah.
Okay. Who will be better capitalized? Who will be in a better position to be able to capitalize on this kind of an opportunity? So I firmly believe, and we have seen this in most of our companies, some of our companies obviously are struggling very badly because they are catering to the B2B office market, which are all closed and all that stuff. But where we have seen that as a startup, our companies have been able to jump up, take the bull by the horn, and use their flexibility, agility, nimbleness, DNA to be able to capitalize. So the way I see it is that any such event like pandemic, overall, if you forget the short term, the pain is great for startup and entrepreneurs. So I would urge each and every one of us to see what is the post-COVID new normal going to be, opportunities thereof, and whether you call it pivot, whether you call it completely change course or modify or do whatever, capture that. Because believe me, a large company will not be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's like a dinosaur. They just can't adapt. Just like a dinosaur adapting. Okay, right?
Probably, except if the large company is run by Mukesh Ambani.
Yeah, yeah, that of course is true. It's a phenomenal story what they're doing, how they've done. In fact, what I would say is, again, if you're a small company, use the fact that they have huge amount of funding.
Yeah.
See if you can create a business that partners with them. I mean, I'd also say selling to them, but then they say they will buy only at distress valuation. They don't give value and all that. So I don't want to go down there in terms of this one. But the fact that they will be able to create a huge platform or ecosystem because of their brand, because of the capital they have, so you can start your businesses. I think it's a great opportunity. So I am bullish for the same thing I would have said for .com also, for Lehman Brothers also, and all that. But again, you need to be alive you need to be there. You need to be persistent. You need to have the funding to be able to stand there, to be able to keep your head above water. When this passes, if your head is above water, you will definitely be a winner. The marginal player will fallen down, would have gone away. The large players will have large problems to handle. They will not be able to do it. You've seen the challenge with Future Group, okay, right? So that kind of a thing will not be there with a startup. They will have a different problem, but they will be able to do that. But I know this is theory. In the short term, immediate term, there's a huge problem. All of us are suffering, and so are many of my companies too. We have to come through it.
Right. So Ganesh, yeah. So, investments, the whole idea of angel investing and early stage investing is conceived to be and still conceived to be, somebody comes up with a great idea and there are angels who fund it. That is all sort of, to some extent, theoretical in India. So do you see that changing in India, number one? And do you see that Indians are generally risk averse? And that's the reason that ideas don't get funded? Any view on that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know this better than me. You have been in angel funding business for a long time. You should be able to answer this better. But I will first give my view and then just flip it over to you. No, I think we are still following the Silicon Valley venture capital system model. So there is a phase lag that is there. The same question 10 years back was not there. But courtesy, angel investors coming in, people from Silicon Valley, US coming in, networks, mentors, advisors, TIE organization, and people like your organization, and all of those has created Chennai Angels, the Indian Angel Network, all of angel networks, all of that lead angels, all of that has created awareness and more sensitivity, more acceptability for this particular asset class. Obviously, we still, I think, are 5 to 10 years behind Silicon Valley in terms of accepting it, because in general, the financial knowledge that this is the highest risk class and what kind of this is still not that prevalent. Okay. Whenever there's a great exit, everybody, including your neighbor and neighbor's aunt, want to be in angel investing. And whenever there's a blow up happens, all the angels start going to heaven. So they are in binary state. Either they are extremely active in the neighborhood community or they are in heaven. Okay, right? So a bit of tempering, neither the huge euphoria, okay, right, nor the gloom and doom should come in. I think that still has not come in. I think we're 5 to 10 years away, where if you speak to angels, super angels in the valley and all that stuff, they are very clear. They will put a single digit percentage of their asset in this particular asset class, knowing fully well that it'll explode, and they will do that. The balance, 90% plus of their assets are in all the other asset classes, which is right way it should be, including some of them into late stage venture fund, private equity fund as LPs and all of that stuff. Yeah. I think that is where we are. Knowledge is still limited. Coming up now, I do get, based on the which year is going by and all that stuff, I get either huge requests for investing in my companies as angel next time you take the money and all that. Same people don't even talk to me when I'm raising money in a different environment, because the market there, where it should be the other way around. People should be bullish and entering. The advice I have for people who want to invest in the asset class, invest in large number of companies, either go through angel network or angel funds or very early stage fund, or if you yourself have the deal flow, invest smaller amount in a larger number of companies so that you are able to optimize this particular asset class. That is my assessment of this asset class.
Agree 100% with you.
I want to hear from you on your knowledge both at IIT Bombay and what you have seen, both sides of success as well as failures. Your book also covers it very well. It's not only about success, it also talks about things that have not worked.
Right.
What is your advice for people entering into angel investing, looking at what's happening in the market for the first time? And two, what do you tell to entrepreneurs when they approach angel investors who are going to invest for the first time?
So I think, to my advice to people who are looking at angel investing as an alternate opportunity, as you rightly said, this is a high risk, high return business. The only point that what has changed and what COVID has really changed is that fragility of those very big businesses is now almost equal to some of the smaller businesses. So yes, the attractiveness of this asset class has improved. That is number one. The second point is to the entrepreneur. I would say that, look, this is people are really risking their very hard earned money, and there is a huge chance that, and you will try your best, you will make it successful, but there is still a huge chance that you will fail. So you have to take that into consideration when you're sort of looking at the valuation and stuff like that, because to a large extent that is irrelevant at this point of time. This would be I know time is running out, so please share your questions. Audience, please share your questions. And over to you, Dhruv.
Yeah, so maybe we'll take one last question and then we'll pick up questions from the audience, because I think there are several of them on chat. So Ganesh, one issue, because you have been you've worn multiple hats. You've been an investor at multiple levels and you've also been an entrepreneur. So as an investor, when you look at investing in a company, how important is the founder or the founders? I mean, if there is a business model that you're not very comfortable with, but you think it can be turned around, but the founder is great, would you invest in him?
Yeah. So at early stage, especially for new age business models, a founder is critical. Like you have said in the book also, a good founder with an average business model will be able to pivot, change, modify, tweak, and come out with it. Also, when you go in at very early stage, which stage at which angel investing that you are talking about, or pre even Series A, the business model is more like an idea. Product market fit still is not there. Therefore, other than broad sector like online travel or B2B for supporting online travel, or companies to support call centers to do better, other than that, what exact shape, size is not known, irrespective of what PPTs and spreadsheets and all that they talk about. So what you are betting on is the ability of these guys to be able to figure out. So that is what is the early stage, most of the cases. As far as we are concerned, because we are promoters mostly, we actively work with it. Our view as promoters, not as investors, slightly different, that we take a good pragmatic mix between the business model, which is really our business model. The idea is our idea, it's not, and the founder's ability to buy into that and the ability to be able to execute and fit for that and their own passion for that idea. So I would say in our case, Growth Story, which is a venture builder platform, it is like 50-50. Okay, right? Even if we see a great founder, if we are not in that sector, I don't think we will not be interested, because we are promoters of that particular business. But this is very specific to Growth Story as a venture builder model, as dictated from an investor. I do have angel investment. In angel investment, I have close to 35 angel investments, which are pure spray and pray, typically the way the angel investment goes. There it is completely based on the founder, and like it happens in many cases, the business has pivoted, changed, has got succeeded, and many of them have shut down also, which is perfectly fine and par for the course.
Okay. So Sushanto, maybe we should open the floor.
Yes, please.
Or open the net now. There's no floor.
So Shabnam, you want to?
Yeah, Shabnam or Naveen, if you can just share some questions which have.
So Dhruv, I've sent it on your chat.
Yeah, Dhruv.
Okay, hold on. So hold on.
Dhruv,
Okay,
if you
so
could read out the question.
yeah, so I think you want to read it out, or should I read it out?
Me.
So let me read it out. So my question is to Ganesh. Sorry, he said Mr. Ganesh. For raising the first round of investment, what would be the one important KPI the founder needs to show to investors? Sales, profit, customers, data. And I assume this is for early stage investments, angel level.
Yeah, so no, it's very simple. At very early stage investment, the investor top concern is that obviously return is one, and two is, will there be a next round that will happen so that it doesn't shut down. Okay, so the ability to show that this will be able to get a next round, large capital from institutional investor.
Correct.
Okay, is important. Otherwise, the game is over, because they know that you cannot return the money out of profit or dividend in a company. Okay, right? So that is completely key. Okay, which means the angel investor will put himself and try to do some reverse engineering. Suppose he puts 25 lakh rupees with this, will you be able to show enough traction, whatever may be the metric, whether it is DAU, MAU, whether it is revenue, whether it is unit metric, whether it is adoption, whether it is whatever. Can you show enough so that next round will take place from an institutional investor at a large money? Because he's not going to exit immediately at the next round. He will exit after 2-3 rounds. So I think that is singularly the key. Okay, right? The way I see it in angel investment, will you have the ability to be able to go and raise the institutional capital so that I'm able to ensure that further capital and returns will come.
Okay. So I think the other question which is here is now specific to your company, because you've also been a very, very successful entrepreneur. Where do you see Portea Medical going in the next 3 odd years?
So Portea Medical, we started it as a home healthcare company now 6 years back. Right now, COVID has helped Portea Medical with tailwinds because people don't like to go into a physical infrastructure if they can avoid it. Therefore, Big Basket and Portea Medical are two of our companies which have got huge tailwinds because of COVID that it has helped. So the way we are envisaging Portea Medical is we want it to be the single point of everything outside of hospital care. So that is the way. So we are building multiple verticals. So if you need a surgery or a baby to be delivered, you still have to go to the hospital. Everything else outside of that, you should be able to get it done at the time and the place that you want. And COVID also has ensured that it's not safe for you to go to a hospital if you can get it done at home. So that is a broad answer. Specifically, things like chemotherapy at home, dialysis at home, things that are chronic and aging at home is what we are focused on. Using technology, point of care devices to be able to provide chronic and elder care from the comfort of your home is the way we are going.
Okay. So one question which actually is addressed to us, the authors, somebody asked about, is this book available in audiobook form? I don't know. We'll have to find out. It's available in Kindle form on Amazon, and obviously paper form in Amazon, Flipkart, and bookshops, assuming you want to go into bookshops right now. So the other question to Ganesh is, how would you compare? I'll just broaden the question a little. How would you compare, when you go to investors, when a founder goes to investors, and again, we're talking of early to middle stage, so let's say up to Series A, Series B. How would you compare approaching Indian investors versus investors sitting in the US, maybe in the Bay Area? What's preferable?
Yeah, so what's a good question. So it depends on the business model. Okay, right? Typically, especially post-COVID, the chances that a Bay Area investor who has not invested in India or who does not have significant presence in India will look at new deals is very unlikely. So if you are India-centric model, then focus on either Indian investors or US investors who already have a presence in India, whether you take Sequoia Capital, Accel, or Lightspeed, all of them have very strong leaders, partners, and even dedicated separate India funds. Okay, right? So I don't know where you. So approaching them would be far easier than, for example, just to give a name. I have nothing against them. A Kleiner Perkins, which is there in US, doesn't have a partner in India. I had one time at a small office, then they shut it down. So the chances that a Kleiner Perkins will look at India investment is very unlikely. So do that stuff. But more importantly, I would say the filter you should use is not even that. Filter you should use is that, is the fund investing in that stage of a company which you are raising? Are they interested in those sectors because they are sector specific? Do they have anything competing, in which case they would not like to do? Do they have enough fund life left to be actively investing in that, or they need to close their next round fundraise to be able to do that? So there are multiple factors. You are talking to an investment banker or to people like Sushanto and Dhruv, or people who are in the ecosystem will be able to tell you whether you are wasting time or this, because they all have a 3 to 4 year investment time horizon out of the 7+1+1 9-year fund rise. If you catch them in the third, fourth year, then they will like to look at late stage companies, okay, so that they are able to exit in that if it's early. So those are the things. Definitely look at people who are active in India, understand India market, have been investing in India, but use the other filters and get people in the ecosystem, including iBankers and advisors, mentors, angel investors who are savvy to help you figure this out. Otherwise, you can end up wasting a lot of time.
So Ganesh, by the way, I must tell you, in the last 1 hour, you've given us a huge amount of masala for the next book. All we need now is your name as co-author. You don't have to do a thing.
Thank you.
So Shanto, you want to ask?
Yes, so there is a question here is, what is the expectation of the investor on return, and what is the size of company when a investor thinks about investment? So I'll talk about it from a angel network perspective. So we at Lead Angels will typically, what is our investor looking for? Our investor is at a ballpark looking at making 10 to 20 times the investment that he has made in a company, so that in a portfolio of about 10 odd companies, where 9 or 8 or 9 will fail, he is able to recoup his investment in that. So that's the investment expectation. The size of the company is, of course, varies from sector to sector, but to give a very ballpark figure, if you're talking about B2B businesses with some technology which doesn't have any sort of tangible element in it, we would be looking at a sort of monthly run rate of at least 10-12 lakhs of rupees, because that will see that there is traction in the business. There are, of course, exceptions at tech, entertainment, and a few other areas where DAU, MAU, those sort of things become more important. Revenue may take some more time to come. If you're talking about tangible product companies, then we are looking in early 30 to 50 lakh MRR sort of numbers when we will start considering it for investment. Right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think there are some more. Just hold on. Yeah, so I think, Ganesh, you covered this to some extent. Somebody has asked, I can't see that question, but I remember the question. Somebody has asked, if I'm a pre-revenue company, can I realistically approach angels to invest? So by the way, I must tell you, if you look at Lead Angels, I think, we have had a very strong learning experience over the last 6-7 years that we've been around. Initially, we used to invest in either pre-revenue or very, very early revenue companies. Over time, we've realized that traction is extremely important, because obviously a risk comes down. And therefore, we have begun to focus more and more on slightly later stage companies. And by the way, that's paying off very well. What's your view, Ganesh, on this?
Yeah, no, I think what you are saying is what I hear from other angels. Obviously, it's a risk return thing.
Yeah.
See, it can be pre-revenue, but if it is pre-revenue, you need to have a lot of other things going for you for somebody to invest. If you are a stellar entrepreneur, if you're a repeat entrepreneur, if you're a guy who understands that particular sector so deeply, okay, right? So you have worked in Biocon, you have worked in molecule, you are a scientist, you are going to come up with a new breakthrough, and you are approaching angels who are interested in this particular space. They will look at your track record, your background, and say, hey man, you know what? This guy has got a shot of going for the moonshot. I'm willing to fund him. Okay. So you need to have an extremely compelling right to win if you are going to be pre-revenue.
Yeah.
If you show more and more revenue, more and more proof points, more and more data points, your right to win gets balanced there. You don't have to do that stuff. That's one. Or you should be a person say, listen, I got savings of 1 crore. I'm going to put a saving of 1 crore. I need 1 more crore from you, and I'm going all in. Okay, right? That is one small right to win that you're putting, saying that you're putting 1 crore. But if you're not putting money, It is pre-revenue. You don't have stellar right to win for that particular model you're executing. Your convincing ability to be difficult. Just put yourself in the shoes of the investor.
Yeah.
He will think the risk is too high for the return that you're promising.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Having said all of that stuff, obviously, depending on the nature of the market during the gloom and doom, even a lot more proof points is not going to get you investment.
That's
During very bullish phase, anything and everything will get funded because people are rushing to invest. All that happens, but that's it. Or it has to be your brother-in-law or mother-in-law or father-in-law who like you so much that they are just putting behind you to encourage you. It's not really an evaluation of your business model or business acumen or the specific business. It's more a thing that if you are going to be doing, I want to support it.
In our book, we have used the terms chacha or mama.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a great.
Exactly. So this is the friends and family round,
Yeah.
which, before you go to a external investor, it's best to get some money from these people and take your business little forward before you hit them. The other is today if you don't have those chachas and mamas, then of course you also have the incubators and accelerators today who are putting in, anywhere from 20 lakhs to 50 lakhs into early stage companies. Some businesses need that to build that first model or the prototype and so on. And that is also available. But don't necessarily go to a VC fund without all this and expect to get funded. At this stage, Shabnam, I think we're reaching 5:30. We can just share everybody's email ID. So anybody wants to contact Ganesh or Dhruv or me, Naveen, if you can, Naveen and Shabnam can share.
Yeah.
And we'll take one.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. I just saw an interesting question here. Just 1 minute.
So folks, feel free to go on for 15 more minutes. No problem.
No, we would love to have Ganesh around, but I'm sure he has.
I don't know. Ganesh, you have the time. Can we stretch?
Yeah, sure.
10, 15 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay for 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So just hold on. Yeah, there is somebody who asked about the fact that he is not in a big city, right? Do I need to move to a big city because where I live right now and where I have my company, I don't have any startup environment. So should I move? One quick comment I have, because again, if you look at our level, the early stage startups and the fact that angel investors would be funding such companies, actually, COVID has taught us it doesn't matter where the hell you are. You can be anywhere, right? Because everything is done online. All your pitches are done online. You approach investors online. So for example, you can approach, if you want funding, you apply to Lead Angels online, or for that matter, any other angel network. And your the potential investors will talk to you online. They will talk to your potential customers online and so on. So it is, I think COVID, it has had a huge number of negative implications, but the positive is that people have realized that I like this word, this phrase which somebody said, which is geography is history. You can be anywhere, but you're still accessible. So actually it doesn't really matter. I don't know. So Shanto, Ganesh, your comments?
Ganesh?
Yeah, Shashanto, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So, absolutely. So now, you're seeing a lot of people who are working for very large companies, living in tier 2, tier 3 cities and working, from home from these companies. And a lot of market in India is also now in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So they're not necessarily, especially if you're talking about Bharat, businesses which are catering to those markets are not necessarily in the metro. So there are it depends on the business that you're in. So if you are really in a business where the people are important and being in a metro like Bangalore is important, then perhaps you have to be in Bangalore. So what your business exigency, you might have to be in the US for, depends on the business. But broadly, if your markets and if your costs are lower in a tier 2 city, go ahead and do it from there. Ganesh?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with both of you. Even pre-COVID, I would say that the tier 2 market, tier 3 market were under-penetrated, underserved markets. Therefore, they were hugely attractive. We have seen whether it is share chat, whether it is daily hand, whether it is vernacular languages, people using WhatsApp as a medium. See, the first 100 million people, 50 to 100 million people, people like me who are in Bangalore, or people like Shushanto or Dhruv in Delhi and this, we are all pampered people. We have apps, we will download, we'll do all that stuff. Trying to get us to start using and switching and this and all that stuff is tough. But most of India, whether you call it Bharat or whatever you call it, they don't have access. They are just discovering very cheap data bandwidth, smartphone at very low price. They have a huge amount of time. We don't have the time. We are stressed. We are going here, there, and all that stuff. Those guys have the time. They watch the same TV show. They have the same aspirations for the brands. They have money. Okay, albeit lesser, but they want to actually spend. So even pre-COVID, I would have said no issues. Tier 2, tier 3 from location point of view is good, cost point of view is good, market point of view is good. Post-COVID, of course, like Dhruv has said, is absolutely you are much better off than somebody in Bombay, Bangalore, or Delhi to start a company and do that.
So there are a lot of questions which have a very common theme. At what stage, once I have got friends and family funding, at what stage should I go to angels? If I'm bootstrapped, at what stage should I go to angels? How do I approach angels? I'm pre-revenue, should we go to angels right now or not? I have one quick suggestion. I'm sure Ty can help, but what is also possible is at Lead Angels, which is where Sushanto and I are, we are part of Lead Angels. We have organized a series of webinars called How Fundable is Your Startup, right? And you're welcome to attend that. It's free, by the way. You don't have to pay for it. So you're welcome to attend that. And one of us takes it, either me or Sushanto. And there we actually analyze all these startups of the founders who come and talk to us. And at that stage, if we find a company is fundable, we put it up for funding. If it is not, then we give advice, we give suggestions, and maybe we provide a mentor who can then take you to a stage where you are up for funding. And what you could do is send an email to either me or Sushanto, or catch us on LinkedIn. I don't know if you can read this. It's my email ID, dhruvn55@gmail.com. Or Shabnam, you can just share my email ID and Sushanto's email ID. So you're most welcome to catch us.
Sure, we'll do that.
Yeah, we may not be able to take all your queries here, because some of them are very specific. So for example, somebody is asked about his legal startup, but we can tackle them in that kind of forum.
No. Sounds good.
Any other question that you want to take? Otherwise we can close.
I think we will answer the questions to you all.
Yeah, so everybody is asking similar questions.
Okay.
Somebody asked, do you think legal tech will be the next big thing after e-com, fintech, and edutech?
Ganesh?
No, again, see the overall theme that given post-COVID, given the chances of people meeting face-to-face, the need for meeting face-to-face, all of that has gone down dramatically. Use of technology across all sectors, both B2C, B2B, doing our work is going to be all pervasive, whether you use the jargon, digital transformation of companies and all of that stuff. So if we can bring technology to anything that is being done, okay, you have a shot at it. Now, specifically, is there an arbitrage model? Is there a cost saving model? What is the value proposition that you do? Are you going to use AI and ML to make legal documentation and going through and all that thing simple? Or are you going to use paralegal in tier 3, tier 4 towns because they are available to be able to see that? All those are questions that you need to answer. And what is the it? But anything to do with using technology to aid, help, and change will definitely is a great opportunity post-COVID across all sectors. So if you have a predisposition for legal tech, please by all means jump at it, go deep into it, take the advice which offer that has come from Lead Angels to give you a free session to be able to do it. But do that because that is huge opportunities across all sectors.
And by the way, agri-tech is one area which is solidly picking up. We've had a lot of applications for funding from agri-tech, and many of these are extremely solid companies. Extremely. So that's one area to look at.
So, as Ganesh said, any area which was required physical meeting and travel and so on and so forth, those if you can, automate or help digitize in some way, is useful. The legal system, of course, is a very good candidate for that. Yeah, Dhruv, anything else?
Yeah, the only thing is in the legal system, I'm not sure if I should be recording this, but in the legal system, how will you transfer cash? That's the only problem.
That even that needs to be disrupted.
Yeah. So we are at 1740.
I think we are good to
Is
go. Naveen, if you will, if there's anything else, again, our emails are here. Ganesh's email also you can share. There are people who may want to.
So please note, Sushanto is saying you can share Ganesh's email. Ganesh has never said that.
No, Ganesh.
No.
No, Ganesh at growthstory.in. Please share. So you have Ganesh at growthstory. No, thanks. I think this has been extremely interesting, and I think what you have done in writing a book about funding, it's very nice to see. It's the first of the book that I've seen, because there are so many myths, misconception, and misunderstanding about funding, including when I first heard about venture capital system in 1991. At that time, only the IFCI had a RCTC, or some risk capital foundation, and Drapers had a India office. Only two were there. I was extremely stunned by the fact that there is somebody who will not take collateral, who will not take any guarantee, and who is willing to give you money and all that stuff. So right from that time, even though I had done my MBA and all that stuff, I did not heard of it. So even today it exists, like the questions we asked about unicorn funded and for loss making, but I'm profit making. I don't get funded to. Why don't people don't respond to me? Why don't people don't return my calls and all these things? Great to see a formal book on funding that is there, and also very nice to see Indian examples. Otherwise, we only keep talking about Peter Thiel's book or Reid Hoffman's book, and which are all nice to read. I love those books, but hardly any relevant for here. So I think it's great to the repository of knowledge that you've taken the trouble to write a book to be able to pen it. And for all of you who are listening here, funding is an extremely important element in the startup journey. Okay, right? Therefore, whether you like it, you don't like it, you have to, as the CEO and founder or co-founder, have to look at funding continuously, constantly, for you to be able to scale the business. In fact, some of the people say CEO's first job is to constantly keep fundraising. Okay, right? Therefore, learning this skill is very important, and conversations like this, conversations like the book, and your own personal understanding of mastery of funding, I think is key to build a successful business, as much as all the other aspects of it is. So all the best to all of you. And once again, even though I'm repeating it, there is no better opportunity than a once in a century pandemic to disrupt status quo. The status quo gets disrupted. It never helps the legacy players. Okay, right? Never helps always the new entrants, people who are coming in new. And we have seen in history that Microsoft created Microsoft and not IBM. Google created Google and not Microsoft. Facebook was created after Google. Google did not create a Facebook. Similarly, Twitter, similarly, Snapchat. So I expect people here to create the next versions of these companies or India unicorns to be able to do that. Okay.
And by the same logic, Portia Medical was created by Ganesh and not by the Tatas or the Birlas.
Yeah, it's not created by the hospital. It will be very difficult for a Portia Medical to be done by a big hospital chain, or for that matter, a big basket by a Reliance Retail or a Aditya Birla More. So the opportunity is huge.
Thanks so much, Ganesh. Thanks, Dhruv. Thanks, Naveen and Shabnam, for hosting this. And look forward for more such sessions with you. Thanks, Ganesh.
Great. And thank you so much, Ganesh, and thank you, Shabnam, Naveen. Thanks, everybody, for patiently listening to all of us, especially to Ganesh.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, boss.
As always, you've been inspirational. So we look forward to making many more sessions with you all.